I'm Naked and Broke. Welcome back. I'm your host, Emmanuel Wisdom. Let's get it. Today we are at Pixel Parlor, a certified B-Corp design studio in Philadelphia committed to making a social, positive, and environmental impact in the world. Yo, I'm Naked and Broke. Welcome back. I'm your host, Emmanuel Wisdom. Today I'm chatting with CEO, founder, and partner at Pixel Parlor, Jenn R Nicholas. Welcome to the show, Jen.
Thanks, Manny.
How are you?
I'm well.
How was the day going?
Surprisingly lovely. It's really great outside. We have nice weather, and it's Friday.
That was surprising because I was out earlier this morning, and it was a little not warm.
Mm-hmm.
When I got back out coming here, it was like 80. I was like, ooh, but it was a nice day.
It's beautiful outside.
I was looking forward to chatting with you. Gonna keep my notes here for the time being, but I've been looking forward to chatting with you all week. I have some questions, but at the same time, we'd love to pick your brains on some things, and we'd love to chat about what you've been up to in the studio as well.
Great.
How long has Pixel Parlor been around?
We've been around, well, there's many different stories. So my husband started Pixel Parlor as a freelance gig in 2004. And then it became a studio and proper in 2011, 2012, when we moved here after abandoning New York City, Brooklyn. We just got burnt out on Brooklyn. Burnt out on New York because that's what happens to designers. We started here as thinking we'd move to Philly and just like start normal jobs, and then we ended up. He ended up doing a freelance gig, which is enough money for me to quit my job, and then a studio was born unintentionally. It was never our intentions, but we ended up with this studio.
Wow, unintentionally?
We did not. That was never. I mean, I had hoped to. I had aspired to, but I never thought we would have like the right situation or the right set of circumstances to pull it off. And then we did. And we started out working from our apartment at the time, and then we ended up getting a studio space and growing. And now we're in our third or fourth studio with 10 employees, 10 people.
Wow, it's funny because earlier we was chatting before. And you was talking about, like, telling me about, like, the journey and process of just knowing what, immediately was in front of you, but not focusing on the rest.
Mm-hmm.
Similar to what you were saying about Pixel Parlor and how it came about with, not thinking about it as a studio. But I feel like now, in a sense, Pixel Parlor represent a lot more than a studio mainly because I worked here. Not really, but I did work here, by the way. But because I feel like the studio has a family approach to it, the setting, but also like in terms of the impact of the work and thinking about the afterlife of the design, but also being selective with clients that you work with. So that I feel like is more than a design studio because it factors a lot more other than just design.
Well, thanks. Well, it grew out of all the jobs, all the things I did before we started the studio. It really started from, and if you're curious, I'll tell you. It all really started from, I learned a lot from all the jobs that looked great as resume lines. I had some of the most amazing jobs in New York City that looked like really great on paper, but were making me miserable, like working 120-hour weeks and, making $2.17 an hour when you did the math was like brutal, really brutal. And I thought that that's how all designers made it, is by like working super, super hard. I got some recognition and I got some write-ups, but like ultimately I was miserable. And then I eventually got a job at a really big corporate design studio, and they were really nice and encouraging and warm and incredibly successful. And I was like, I'm taking notes. I'm going to take this with me. Just like, you don't have to be crazy. You don't have to be obnoxious to be a good designer or a successful designer. You don't have to be cruel. You don't have to be indecisive. You don't have to be a bad business person. You can do all, you can be a good business person. You can be a good person. You can be a nice person, try to do something with your powers as a designer. And it was my big experiment to see if we could try to make that happen, right? I was like, I saw something happening at one of my last jobs in New York City, and I just felt really inspired by that, and I wanted to take it and see what I could do with it on my own.
Wow.
And of course, my husband, my partner, he really helped me and supported me through the whole thing. But I don't think I could have done it without him, for sure. But I really dug my heels in and like focused on making sure that it was something more than just like people pumping out design.
It's always interesting learning more about like the story, because I guess societal. We taught as a society to just think like from A to B, but really is a lot of like roadblocks and stops along the way. But with Pixel Parlor, before we kind of get more into Pixel Parlor and what you do in the studio, I want to chat a little bit more about you and probably go back a few more years.
Sure.
And, was SD Media Group your first job?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you did some resume. So I went to school in Cincinnati, the University of Cincinnati DAP program. So let's even go back before that.
Yeah.
I graduated high school. All I wanted to be was a designer. My parents.
So you've always.
Since I was 11, I decided I wanted to be a designer, and I wanted to sit in a situation like this in a big city.
Wow.
When I was 11, my parents told me no. My mom went to school for fashion design. My dad was into photography, but they were like, those are hobbies. Those are not careers. So Jen, you need to go to school for engineering or science or something math related, because you're good at engineering, science, and math. And I was like, but I don't feel passionate about all those things. I can get good grades in those things. So they pushed me into going to Ohio State for environmental science. Good decision on their part. But I quickly realized that they do the weed out process thing in the first few weeks of school, and they're like, so just saying, if you don't want to work at a landfill, get your PhD, work at a landfill, and make $24,000 a year for the rest of your life, you might want to consider a different career. And I was like, I want none of those things. So I went back, I got into painting and drawing school at DAP in Cincinnati. And then quickly realized that although I like painting and drawing, I really loved what was happening on the other side of the room, on the other side of the hall, which was which were the design studios. And I just became addicted. I was like, all I wanted to do, I became obsessed. These are my people. I knew it. And part of that program was going to work at places like ST Media Group and working on VMSD magazine and Signs of the Times and all these magazines. Oh, I have so many stories. So many stories about things that went on in the basement of that building. I'll tell you later. But it was, it was my first job. It was my first job, my first internship. And it was really interesting because it was my first job. And I remember sitting at my computer when the towers fell on September 11th.
Wow.
So that was my first job. It was really intense. But then like that job led to all the other jobs, led me to New York City and all the other stuff. But yes, that was my first internship.
Overall good experience?
Yeah, they were really sweet. They were really, really lovely people. They let me do the silly things that they let somebody who's like a sophomore in college do. They let me do it. They let me do it. I think they cringed a little bit, but they still let me do it.
That's awesome. A little bit of creative freedom and things.
Totally. But I have to tell you, they're parking. I had to park next to the rat room, which is where I'm not kidding, they had snakes in the basement. Oh. And they fed the snakes with rats. Oh. And my car had to park next to the rat room. And it was not good for anybody.
I can imagine.
It was so weird. Weird things happen in design places of business.
So was the snakes like was it like a mascot for the studio?
They
Or?
just collected snakes.
Oh.
So there was a whole room of snakes adjacent to a whole room of rats.
Adjacent to a whole room of people.
Adjacent to a whole room of people, and they made the interns park outside of the vent where the rat room vented out and made my car smell like rat. True stories.
Wow, but what I took from that story, you mentioned passion.
Yeah.
You was going like back and forth either with your parent or, you know, major-wise. Was passion was what you use as your guide. How important is that to kind of rely on like your self-intuition when it comes to, especially like career decision where like a lot of like young people have zero clue, but personally you feel drawn to certain things. What would you say like you need to lean into in terms of like when it comes to that decision making?
You have to listen to your gut. So it's the only reason I'm here right now is because I just consistently listen to my gut and my intuition, and just like leaned into my passion. I'm not necessarily the best designer. Like you are just like a naturally talented human being who just exudes like creativity at all times.
I'm blushing.
But I am a creative human being, but I see it like I like see it in like a different way, as like I can help inspire people to bring stuff to life in a little bit more than me necessarily doing it myself.
Yeah. I did enjoy how when we worked together, because like when I created something and I would send it out to you, for me as a designer, I'd be like, oh, it's like 90% done. And then after our conversation, I'm like, yeah, it's more like 30% done.
Yes.
So I enjoy that process because it was more of a sharpening process.
Yeah.
That's how I looked at it. And so I enjoyed like that perspective where like it was more of me getting out of my head, but also I see it more as a visionary, if that makes sense. Which is, you know, a creative approach as well.
Yeah.
And just being able to say, okay, you kind of went super hard at this, but it could be, you know, it could actually reach where it needs to be with if you added X, Y, and Z, which I thought was really cool because a lot of people really don't offer me that.
Yeah.
But I'm still,
Thanks.
you know, I'm still a designer, young, coming in the game, and I love, you know, like as far as like criticism and like creative criticism.
Yeah.
But so when we worked together, I appreciated the fact that whenever I send you stuff, it wasn't whether it was review or, you know, stuff that the client was going to see. It was always another step that we had to either take some stuff or make it a lot more better than what it was.
I like to I want to give people the space to come up with what is in them, right? And then I want to give them the tools to either push it further themselves or find a collaborative partner to help them take it to the next level.
Right.
Or just think about things from a different perspective. Like take that, obviously you're here for a reason. You have this creativity that I see in you and I know what you're capable of. And I just want to figure out like how to make you comfortable enough to make it come out, like get your creativity out, but also make you thoughtful enough to listen to what the task at hand is and respond to that. And then, you know, all of us get creative block, right? But there's so many strategies to get around the creative block, and a lot of it is like collaboration, taking a walk, like just like thinking about it from a different perspective, and it's never grinding away at it. It's never grinding and grinding and grinding at something is never going to end up with a good solution. It's going to end up with you grinding and feeling burnt out. It's really not like there are much more productive ways of doing it.
Yeah, I would say now I have a more like healthier balance as far as in terms of design and just kind of not trying to be a workaholic, but like you were saying, find that balance to get outside or go for a walk or listen to music, watch a movie. But going back a little bit to my time when I was here, I really appreciate the fact that with 2020 being the year it was, that I felt I was fortunate enough to be quote unquote in-house, but not really, with Parlor, and how we were able to kind of handle the situation that no one really knew what was happening. And that speaks to some of the things I was saying earlier about Parlor being more than just like a studio. I thought that whole experience it wasn't great, but as far as handling the situation, I felt like you and Andrew did a good job with Parlor, and also Amanda I won't forget you, Amanda. And, you know, just kind of staring the team. I remember we had one time we all hopped on the call and we were speaking of creative blocks was why I thought of this. Because that was a tough year with, you know, working and outputting. And I remember you was like, whatever you need to do, you know, go and do it. And if you know, whatever hours you feel like you could put into that, you know. So I thought that was very helpful. Because I have friends who at their jobs was telling me some other stuff. And I'm like, I don't know about y'all. I've only worked in design. My job is pretty casual. So I couldn't offer a lot more. But as far as the overall effect of what was happening, I feel like coming out of that experience, in terms of speaking to like creative balance and other things, I feel like I learned a lot from that situation. So I want to thank you, and you know, Pixel Parlor as well.
I've learned from the worst. I basically like learned a lot of things not to do, and I try to do my best to not do them.
Yeah.
And I also like, I mean, I am a human. I know what my limits are. I've pushed myself to my limits and far beyond them.
Right.
And I can see now that I've done that to myself, and I don't recommend anybody do that to themselves. I can see where other people are starting to push themselves to their limits. And when they need to take a step back and recalibrate, or take a day off, or just like go on a walk or eat lunch or meditate or just go on a run or anything.
Right.
Just like take that time for yourself, because if you don't take it for yourself, nobody's going to give it to you. And well, maybe I might, but also it's like that's that fine line of like knowing what your limits are, not taking advantage of a situation. But we really like, I actually care. You might not, and people might not think I actually care, but I really do care. I invite people into this because I see their potential and their talent, and also I think they might be lovely to work with. And I just want to see what we can magically make together. I think there's like so much good, interesting chemistry. And if we're just given the right people to collaborate with and to be around and that we trust, like I think we can make really, really cool things. It's really hard. For me, it's really hard because I hire people like you and I'm like, you are not going to stay forever. You are so going to do your own thing.
I'm here forever.
You'll be my friend forever. Be my friend forever, but you won't stay at the studio forever because I know you're gonna like want to go off and do your thing and whatnot. And I know that happens with a lot of the people I bring into the studio. But I also think like there's magic and things that we can learn from each other. And like I'm always gonna be, if I need hand lettering, if I need a mural, if I need whatever, I'm gonna be like, Manny, you're coming, and can you do this with me? Like I'm always gonna pull you into that stuff. And it's because we're friends, right?
Yeah.
And that's like the other thing is like, yes, I'm your boss, or I was your boss. But like, if you're good to me, I'll be good to you, and just be my friend, and we'll come up and find other cool things to work with in the future.
And even like during my time here, it was a lot of, I want to say, even with the serious project we did, there was a lot like childlike approach to a lot of the projects we did, even with the bollards or the mural we submitted. The design, it just like the approach of, you know, the concept and all of that I enjoyed, because again, the end product is going to be, if it's coming from Pixel Parlor, it'd be good, but you know, the concept and how people are going to react to it, it's, as a designer, it means a lot. So that approach of finding that balance is very important, but I think that's something you do really well.
Thanks. I just want to have fun. That's all I want to do is have fun. I want to do like make things that I'm proud of, that I'm excited about, that that give me a sense of joy and hopefully give other people a sense of joy. Like there's, especially right now, like everybody's, it's real hard. Like, right, it's not easy. Like, especially it's better than it was a year ago, but it's still not perfect.
No, not at all. But yeah, I feel like we're working towards some sort of normalcy again.
And any kind of like, and when I start feeling like I'm getting the pressure, the external pressure of the awfulness that's coming in on me, it makes me push back and try to do something better and happier and bring joy to myself and to the people around me. I have to push back on that awfulness. And in the design that I do and the people I work with, and how I spend my time and all that stuff is like, and when I volunteer, like when you feel powerless, like do something good. And that can be creatively good, just positive, I mean, even like collaborating with your friends is like, makes you feel so good. Cause you're like, I My friends are amazing.
That was one of the things I took advantage of during the quarantine, was collaborating with artists, because we were all, outside of work, we had the free time, and that was nice because lettering, I was, being able to tap into other people's audience, but see them react to the work, and vice versa as well. So collaborating is always fun, to even just push yourself as well as a creative.
And we're taught in school to not be collaborative. We're taught to be competitive and not collaborative. And that is the biggest mistake, is that designers are like, this is all about me and my style and who I am and what I bring to the world. That's one tiny portion of it. The rest of it is like how you work with others and what you can create collectively.
Yep.
Because there are so few projects that ever are you from beginning to end. Although like the things that you work on scream Emmanuel wisdom, you work with other people to get those done. You can't do it yourself. If you do it yourself, if you do it all yourself, you're gonna be a really miserable and not productive person.
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying, most of the stuff I do, for me, it has to represent me, because to an extent they're personal. But even with like commercial or freelance work, with commercial work, it's like I'm at times not even like a percent of the project,
right?
Because there's the illustrator, there's the photographer, there's someone else, and I'm providing the text, that lockup to go sit on someone's illustration, or so I'm like, I have a time frame, and I understand that I'm just a puzzle piece in the whole thing. But I feel like also thinking about that on a personal level, that helps invite good criticism, or be able to accept good criticism. But I want to kind of take a step back,
Sure.
and kind of return back to you, as we were talking about earlier. Dumb, Naked, and Broke, welcome back. You've been told that you couldn't be a designer, an activist, an entrepreneur, a female business owner, et cetera, et cetera. You said 1,000 times more than anyone has ever encouraged me to pursue my path in life. I had to learn to listen to my gut with relentless pursuit. I want to talk about that in a minute. But you've since held positions as a graphic designer, a graphic design manager, creative director, and now CEO and partner at Parlor. I'm sure there were a lot of discouragement along the way leading up to Parlor. Talk to me a little bit about some of those discouragements and the gender bias that you face early in the career, and probably still now.
Okay, gender bias is a big thing. I really wish it wasn't a thing, but it is. I spend a lot of time trying to make sure that I'm the most educated, prepared person in the room at all times, so that I can be bulletproof, to prevent people from just trying to destroy me, like tear me down. So like as a CEO, like I sit on a board, I have HR consultants, I have business consultants, I have consultants for my consultant. Like it just goes on and on and on, because the expectation is that I've been told many times, why are you in this room? I want to talk to your partner, the CEO,
Wow.
as in my husband. I've been asked to leave meetings because
Wow.
I wasn't who they thought the CEO was.
Wow.
I have everything, I mean, everything imaginable. Like I've had people shake their fists at me in anger. They would never do that to my business partner, who's a man. So I've been cussed out. I've been everything you can imagine, from clients to employees to everything in between. I've seen it. And maybe it's not because I'm a female, but it might be because it's me. But I really can't help but see that the repetitiveness, the repeated sort of the microaggressions, and some of them are not very micro, that happen to me that I don't see happening to other people. So as a CEO now, I really have to invest in myself to make sure that I am as bulletproof as possible, so that I don't get picked apart. I mean, I'm an extraordinarily resilient person. I grew up with not much. It got better over the years, but I mean, I grew up in a not so great situation, and I relentlessly pursued getting my getting out of that and exploring and finding a better life for myself. And I think I just have to continue to do that, and everything I do, continue to just, like, it is that following your gut, following your intuition.
Right.
I have a very strong vision for myself. I have always had a very strong vision for myself, for my life, for my business, for my children, I have just like this really, I just see what I want, what I know is possible, and I just get up every morning and work a little bit closer to it every single day. And people definitely try to put roadblocks in front of me, and it's happened so many times. And it's really great to sometimes have a bad memory. I don't really have a bad memory, but I just like I've really gotten really good at editing out the nasties and getting the people who are not helping me. If they don't add, they subtract, right?
Yep.
And that whole idea is like, if you can't make my life better, if we can't collectively make our lives better together, then we're not meant to be part of the same ecosystem, right?
Yep.
So I've had to be relentless. If I was, I most likely wouldn't be alive right now if I wasn't just like absolutely relentless and just not willing to take whatever other people's vision for me seriously.
Yeah. No, I can relate to that for sure. Dumb, Naked, and Broke. Welcome back. We were talking a little about like gender biases in the design industry, and I was chatting with Rose a little bit, and I made a joke that, you know, it's like design is not like a gang related thing. There's no need for hate and all of that.
Right.
But I also, like, I cannot like relate to like the story you were saying about, you know, being a female in the design industry. But what I can relate to is being someone of African descent. And I remember as a student coming into like that, you know, graphic design, they didn't really know. My understanding of graphic design was logos, flyers, brochures, sometimes business cards. That was it. And then I had my first experience at Cloud Gestion, and that opened my eyes to what graphic design could be and the different avenues or industries I could plug myself into. And curiosity-wise, that made me wanted to, you know, explore and work with a lot of other people. But the first thing I was confronted with was the fact that I didn't see a lot of representation as far as people that look like me in the studio. And so for a while, there was some sort of like curating with the work to, quote unquote, what I thought would be acceptable. So I can relate to that. But personally, I would say I've never been in an environment that I felt to, you know, even think about me being someone of African descent. But I feel like societally, that's like a thing that a lot of people have to either think about, get over. But after college, I worked with, it was like a freelance gig. I worked with Kelly Mayella Architects. So I was doing that design implementation. And one of the owners then, Emmanuel Kelly, he was an older gentleman, probably in his mid-70s, which was kind of crazy because his name was also Manny. And I was like, oh, I'm like looking at my future. But he was cool. He came in with a stick, and he had a cigar in his hand. I was like, dude, you're supposed to be smoking in here. He's like, I own.
Okay.
That's what he told me.
Sure.
It's like, I own. I'm the owner. I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. But we had a relationship, and he was telling me about that I had to get comfortable with being a black graphic designer. And for a moment, I had to think about it, because I always try to create, even like as far as the, like, I never do like the race thing until it matters. Then I let people know where I'm at.
Yep.
But as far as me as a person, like, I'm not like claiming like a specific flag or you know, things like that. I know who I am, but as far as me, I don't know how other black people feel. You know, I know how I feel about a situation. So when people do like, you have to, you know, fit a certain box or something, it kind of takes a lot out of me personally, as far as my personality.
Yep.
Probably maybe 1 to 2% would be reflected in the work or whatever else I do. So I say all that to say I can imagine, on the other hand, you know, what it's like because it's not just, you're not the only one. There's many other people, many other females who are probably a lot more talented and a lot more males, owners or designers that are out there. But I feel like conversations is, people say, is a starting point. I'm someone who believes in action. So when you were talking earlier about kind of just relentlessly pursuing things, it was very similar to how I, approach my goals and things like that. Realizing that, no one is going to, kind of wake you up in the morning to, either if you want to go jogging or whatever you need to do to prep yourself for the day. It's all up to you. You have to self-motivate but most importantly, listening to your intuition and going all out on your passion and pursuing those.
Well, you and I have been given like this even greater responsibility. You as a black male designer and me as a female designer, like we have to go out and we have to seek to bring people in. We have to we have to show what it is to be the people that the person who we are and what we exhibit to the world. We have to make sure that we're representative and we invite folks in, right? Like for you and I both, it like goes back to elementary school. Like when kids are like figuring out what they want to do in elementary school, we have to say, hey, kid that looks like me or kid that doesn't look like me, this is like a legit thing that we can do.
Right.
And how do we bring you in? Because it's a design, it has an industry-wide racism issue. It goes back, and people are now, like the Equity Council and some other folks within the design industry are like making it an agenda item and giving it and giving it prominence and like really addressing it head on. But until 2021, design has been around for a long time.
Yes.
Like it's not really, everybody's been like, oh, just the way it is.
Yep.
But we have to like actively invite people in and make sure that they feel welcome, even though they might not be visually represented in the space right now. We have to make sure that we are doing everything we can to make sure that that doesn't continue for the next generation.
Yeah, exactly. And on the other side of that, I feel like people need to put themselves in situations as well, and not just kind of think what other people would think of you, but actually apply yourself.
Exactly.
And see what the end result is for yourself.
Yes. I think like what I've heard, and I as a B-Corp, like I have committed to, as a B-Corp design studio, have committed to hiring as many diverse people as I can. It's very challenging to do because it doesn't start at elementary school. Like there's like an elitism to design, like design feels like a luxury and not a practicality or not an important communication tool. It's like presented because like Kanye is all of a sudden like a designer, which he does not design anything, but because it just is like this elitist. So you like you see like anybody first, the appearance that anybody can be a designer is complete hogwash, and then on top of it, like it's a trade, and it's never really. It just never has been taught appropriately to be able to be inclusive. It's been taught as a luxury, and it is just not anymore. Design is not a luxury. It never has been, but I think like there's an exclusivity that I think people really enjoyed, that exclusivity, and like some of us benefited from that exclusivity, but we need to break down the walls on that because it's not healthy and it's not serving anybody any good.
No, not at all. Well, some people, but for the majority, no. And what you were saying with you hiring, people from different backgrounds, coming up in being a young person, by the time you go through like the filtering system of, do I want to do this? Is this a place for me? Is people like me in this industry? By the time you get to, say, a studio like Pixel Parlor, you probably already gave up and chose something else. Yeah. So in turn, it makes it a lot harder for you to, fulfill things that you set out to fulfill as far as having a balanced studio. But I want to talk a little bit about what you think is the most important quality a young female designer needs to have.
Have a strong gut sense. Just have like I mean, and this is regardless of your male or female, have a good personality and the ability to get over yourself. Like, get over your ego, get over yourself. Like, come with your creativity, but come with an open mind and an ability to collaborate. It is not the you show. It is not the Jen show. It is not the Manny show. It is not the anybody else show. I think, like, just come in with, bring your talents, bring your skill set, bring your good attitude, bring your fun, bring your personality, and just, like, know that if you're in the right place, you'll be appreciated for that. I think just having a good sense of self and also being self-reflexive. I think anybody and everybody can be successful as a designer if you show up with your A game, with your skills and, like, all the cool things that you can do, but then you know how to, like, work with other people. I think, like, working with other people and collaborating is really important. I think as a woman, oh my gosh, the things I've heard, your voice is too squeaky on phone calls. You have upspeak. Oh, girls can't drop the F-bomb on a client call. Like, all these things. And
Really?
It's like, oh yeah. Constantly. I'm like, oh, well.
That's not a
I
gender
just did that
thing.
5 times, so whoops.
I mean, if you're trying to say don't cuss on the call, that makes sense.
But then there's me, who's just like, but sometimes the F-bomb is exactly what you need to say at that moment.
It's an expression.
As an expression. It's not to purgatory. It's not purgative.
Yeah.
It's not pejorative. It's not to, like, be mean to people. It's just like, this fucking sucks.
And then you let it out, it's gone, and you move on.
And then they're like, you're right, it did fucking suck.
Because it's like you were saying, some of the things that people aren't, like, privy to is, like, by the time you make it in here, you've kind of prepped yourself to be able to work. Yeah. And people don't understand that. Like you were talking about, letting go of ego and all of that stuff. It's all very important to have a more, like, I guess, fruitful collaboration or a fruitful collaborative space. Because if you could work out your stuff, then the better version of you is showing up, and the people you're with better appreciate the fact that, the uniqueness you're bringing to the table, but the fact that the energy is right and the creativity is better off for it.
And women do not need to be mousy and quiet and sweet and polite. They can have a sense of humor, be ridiculous, occasionally drop the F-bomb, like, have the full range of human emotions. Like, you can be a real functional human being. You don't have to, like, sell yourself short of, like, who you are. Like, I like people because of who they are. Right. And I think women are told that they have to fit into this cute little box that's, like, tiny and cute and smells good and, like, never, steps out of line and never stands up for themselves. And that's, I think, total garbage.
Yeah, I always thought it was, like, a weird dynamic because if you look at, like, male, female, I guess just who they are as far as gender, women are more emotional. But when you step outside of, like, whoever you are, they're like, oh, you got to bottle it up, which I feel like is weird because then dudes, we're able to be ourselves, whether privately, publicly, whatever. Just, you're just a guy. We don't tend to express a lot emotionally. So when you take whoever, someone who's a female and is used to, expressing themselves, and you put them in a work setting or whatever setting, and there are certain things they can't do, I feel like, as far as, like, we were talking about them being that, the better version of themselves, or even doing the work that they need to do, that kind of hurt because of, they're not feeling like themselves or feeling comfortable in the space to really explore self in a sense.
You have to really, I think, to become a really good designer, you have to really have a good sense of self, and you have to have a really good sense of humor. And I think you have to, whether you're male or female, or anything in between, you just have to, you have to be able to understand your emotions, understand your boundaries, understand how to communicate. And if you're ever being, like, wedged into a situation, I don't care what job you're in, but design especially, if somebody's trying to turn you into something you're not, it's never going to work. No. It's never going to work. You're just going to, like, rebel, and you're going to hate it. It's going to be miserable, and everybody's going to be unhappy in the end. So like making sure that you have like, you know, your basic needs are met, and then you have the ability to be yourself. Like those things are where creativity really happens and where it's really interesting. Like if you're not like, obviously like you're going to have external pressures. People are going to push on you to ask you to do it a little bit this way or a little bit that way or quicker or whatever. But like, you know, they're not, you just have to be able to be invited into a space that you can bring who you are and bring your perspective and be celebrated for that.
Right.
And not have to like fit a very specific prescriptive mold. I think that's just not very much fun, and it's not very interesting, but also makes for really unhappy people.
Yeah. And we talked about, you know, in terms of a young female or just any female quality wise. But on the other side of that, what would you say a male designer or someone in that setting needs to work on as far as quality, but also in terms of treating fairly? What are some things you would say you've noticed and you feel like guys should work on?
This does not apply to you, by the way. I think like
listen up, bros.
yeah, I think
I'm exempt. No, I'm kidding.
Well, we met in a very unique way, and you and I like got started off on a different foot, so we can talk about that later. But I think young women come into the studio like very, very like, oh, tell me what I can do, can I help, whatever. And guys are like, I'm the best. I can't write an email, but I am like the best. I don't know how to call people on the phone, but I'm the best. And it's really just like not helpful. It's just really not helpful. And like, I mean, and some of them really are extraordinarily talented people, but like if we can't like communicate past like, I'm the best, and
Right.
forget you people who don't know anything because I'm the best. If we can't get past that, then we're not getting anywhere. Like nobody's getting anywhere, and it's toxic. It ends up being toxic, and that goes for women too. I was one of those 25-year-old assholes myself. I learned my lesson, but like I think it's really hard. Like when young designers come into a space, male or female or otherwise, having a chip on your shoulder that you're the best. But like when you're like 23, 24, 25, like you gotta just like figure out how to work with people and
Right.
what working is.
Right.
And like what you did in college is not
No.
what you do here.
No.
Totally different things. And you might be the best at something, but you as one individual do not encompass the best
Right.
of everything. And
Right.
and please just learn how to write an email. Not you.
Absolutely. I mean, even with my writing, that's like something I recognize and had to work on. But that's something you and I have chatted about. I've reached out to you like multiple times in Slack. That's for me, and that's something I do well. It's like I don't shy away from asking questions.
Do not.
And it doesn't matter what the subject matter is. If I have a need to learn or curiosity, I'm going to ask because is there, the opportunity is there, the people is there, and I feel like most people shy away from free knowledge.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
Like free knowledge, they shy away. They would rather pay for.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, and I think people think that they have all the knowledge when they don't realize like there's all this free knowledge
Right.
laid out in front of you. If you just
Exactly.
know to ask for it or to like stand closer to it and like see what's happening going on and absorb it, I think people are just like, I'm the best. And then they miss out on a big chunk of cool stuff that's going on that they would have easily been able to access if they weren't already the best in their own head.
Right, and that was some of what I was speaking to earlier when I was saying when we worked together and I'm sending you stuff it was like I'm like, okay, this is good, this is and then chopping it down to reality.
You always handle it really well.
Yes, I've been like exposure to criticism. Like Rose and I went to Charter High School for Architecture and Design on 7th and Sanson, closed in 2020, I believe. But criticism, as far as critique, started there from 9th grade with our drawings, and whether it's like model drawing or observation or architecture, like blueprints and stuff. You had to like show it to the teacher,
Yeah.
or in some cases, present to the class, and you know, people pick it apart or we say it's good. But I feel like as an individual, you had to understand what is at the meat of what
Yeah.
people are saying.
Yep.
You can't have an emotional attachment to it.
It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, that's very hard. But for me, that was something I had to submit to early on. And when I went to college, I invited it. I was the one person doing critiques where I kind of got mad when students didn't have anything to say, because that's the point of the class. Is, you know, everyone has different perspectives and things, but it was like, oh, their work is good, and I'm like, okay, it's supposed to have a function. You know, that's the most important thing. Let's talk about that. But only like teachers and other friends who were like close to me would give me real feedback.
Yeah, it's really awkward when you like present your stuff and then it's crickets. They're like, oh, it's great, everything's great, and you're like, something really bad is gonna happen. Like, oh, I'm like, okay, we're gonna hang up this call, and like 2 hours later, I'm gonna get like an email that's like, okay, and this was wrong, this was wrong, that. But like, so yeah, it's very unnerving. I feel like that's just part of the conversation and how you build something is like the critique cycle. And isn't always good. It's like anything. Like when you go through the critique cycle or any kind of like process of building something, you listen to everything, and then you digest it, and you pick out the key things that you think are really, really salient, like really important, and you integrate those things, and that's what'll keep things moving forward. Instead of like, if you listen to all of the things and you give everything equal like priority, then it turns into mud. But if you like know how to sort of like, oh, yeah, they're right. That does kind of suck. Oh, if I just changed that color or moved that over, that would be so much better. Oh, yeah, I spelled that wrong or whatever. Like those little things, and you just like realize, and you absorb that. And then also like not making that same mistake again time after time. Like that is how you grow, and that's how the design improves, and that's how you just get a richer product, which is, I think, hard for some people to realize, is that the whole goal is to get a richer end product. And not to just water it down to nothing. Like it's like, yes, sometimes it does like turn into a ball of mud, and there's nothing great about it. But I think most of the time you end up with something that's, if you know what key things to listen to, and not listening to everything. You don't have to listen to everything, but listening to the right things, and and keeping an open mind, and hearing it and saying, I don't need to actually like be this person's hand. But what I can do is listen to what they said and modify things just a little bit to make it better, to achieve those goals.
Yeah, it's kind of like I remember like post Pixel Parlor, like one of the things I reflected on was just me as a person. My process is, if I have an idea, I get it done, and it was like sketch. Sometimes like the sketches ended up looking good, which. Afterwards, like I think after the first logo brand identity we worked on together, I was like, wow, there's a lot of time I could just cut off of these sketches, and you know, so I started to trim off of my process a lot more. But what I started to explore was not diving fully into like a concept to concept sketch and then building. It was like, okay, I could get it to a certain point, and then I'm like, okay, let it breathe, let it live. I'm gonna explore another option. So at the end of said session, whether it's an hour or two, I have a lot more concepts to look at and say, okay, this is working, this is, you know, the strongest, this is the weakest, and kind of pull from them. But I was listening to a music producer talk about the process of putting an album together. And what he talked about was, so basically an artist will record, if they're like a high caliber artist, and really pay attention to that craft and all of that, we record about 200 songs. And the album ends up being cut down to anywhere between 15 to 20 songs. And that blew my mind, because I was like, that's crazy. I want an album with 200 songs. But in terms of quality, like we were saying, it wouldn't be the same. And just being able to have that much options to go through and you know, slice, and that was like, obviously, you know, not all the producers go that length. Some other people, 70, 100, whatever. But at the end of the day, it still comes down to like 12 or 15 on an album, which is a lot more. Like we were talking about design. If that was like concepts, that's like like crazy. I mean, first of all, you wouldn't do about 200, but in terms of giving yourself that option
Yeah.
to say, okay, I know for a fact that regardless of how I feel, I'm going to leave this session with something. So that is something I had to kind of relearn, but like retweak a little bit,
Yeah.
and still working at it, but it has served me well so
The
far.
other cool thing is to go back to that stuff, like get that project done, make it go away. You've got this perfect 15 things
Right.
that you made, but you can go back to all that sketch work at a later time, like 5 years later, and look at it and be like, oh, and you can like bring something back to life or use it as inspiration for something moving forward, because like it might not have been right at that moment or at that time,
Right.
but like at some later point of time, you can like there might be something there that you just like overlooked, or times have changed and the aesthetic has changed,
Right.
and you like find a little hidden gem in that
Yeah.
former trash can.
It's funny how creativity works, but I feel like a lot of it has to do with self-awareness and just not like being particular, but being open to
Yes.
changes, which, again, learning and trying to push a lot more. When I was in college, I didn't do sketches. It was weird because I show up, critique on my final work. Everyone's like, whoa, how did it get here? I'm like, I don't know.
It just happened. I'm magic.
So, like, but going through that, even when you were talking a little bit about when we met, our initial meeting, it was crazy, but what I got out of it was I was a much sharper person. I remember I went back to college, and because what I got from it, our particular meeting, was I think I only brought in a physical portfolio.
I don't think you brought anything in.
Wow.
I think you just pulled up your website on Andrew's computer.
Stop the camera.
I was like, I don't think we have anything to talk about here.
Yeah, why are you shaking your head back there, bro?
You showed up without a portfolio, and I like pulled up your website, and I'd already looked
Yeah.
at your website, and I was like, this dude's work is good.
That was sophomore year. So again, the brain of a sophomore college kid, but that taught me so much more. It's funny that you remembered it that way. I remember it. I had a print portfolio. So.
You had
It's even worse.
Yeah, you had nothing. And I was like, because if you had a print portfolio, that would have been perfect. I would never have sent you packing, but I think,
Yeah.
I think, so how I recall, my first meeting of Manny was, you sent me your portfolio, your online portfolio. I looked through it, I was like, your work is good, come in, let's talk. And then it was an old studio across the hall. And then you came in and you didn't have a print of your resume and you didn't have a physical portfolio. And I was like, hey, what are we talking about? And you're like, I don't know. You didn't even have your laptop. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to. So I think I sat behind Andrew's computer and pulled your portfolio, your website portfolio up.
Yeah, I probably had a flash drive on me or something.
Maybe.
Because I moved with those. I remember those times. But
All I know is I think I made you leave. Or some version of something. What
no,
happened?
we went through the portfolio.
Oh, we did,
and,
okay.
Yeah, and then I left, naturally at the end. But yeah, we went through the portfolio and all of that.
But I have my word to the wise: never show up to an interview without a resume or a portfolio, at least loaded on your computer, because
Yep.
it will get awkward real fast. Yeah, show up with something, please. It'll get awkward real fast.
This is the end of part 1 of this episode. Make sure to check out part 2, where Jenn shares insights on what she looks for in a designer's portfolio, Pixel Parlor WBE certification, and we discuss a lot more.